You're in the field. The sun has dipped behind the coast mountains. The temperature is dropping, and the light is fading fast. You have a subject in front of you. Maybe it's a white-tailed deer moving through the brush, or a friend standing by a campfire. You want the shot, but you're terrified to touch that ISO dial because you've read the forums. You've been told it adds noise and ruins the image. So, you keep the ISO at 400. Your shutter stays open too long, or you try to fix it by brightening a dark, muddy file later on your computer. Ironically, keeping your ISO low often creates more noise, because brightening an underexposed file in post-production is just another form of gain, only worse. Because of a misunderstanding about how your camera actually works, you aren't just losing a photo, you're losing your ability to see in the dark. I'm Sylvie Lynn, and today we're fixing your fear of the dark by mastering the physics of ISO. We're going to look at why ISO isn't actually sensitivity, but a volume knob for light, and why paying the noise tax is the only way to shoot in the real world. In photography, we use the term sensitivity for ISO, but that's a bit of a white lie left over from the days of chemical film. Your digital sensor's physical sensitivity to light is fixed. It doesn't actually change or become more sensitive. Instead, think of ISO as signal gain. Imagine you're listening to a quiet recording of a loon on a lake at midnight. If the recording is too quiet to hear, you turn up the volume on your amplifier. That's exactly what ISO does. You aren't making the loon louder in real life, you're simply amplifying the weak electronic signal that your microphone already captured. This is where sensor size matters. A full-frame camera has larger individual pixels, wider buckets to catch the light. A crop sensor has smaller buckets. The smaller the bucket, the less light it catches, meaning the camera has to apply more artificial gain to make the image bright. To control this volume knob, you need to understand the currency of light. Stops. In photography, a stop simply means doubling or halving the amount of light. When you move your ISO from 100 to 200, you have increased the gain by one stop, doubling the brightness. Moving from 400 to 800 is another stop. This mathematical sequence is the exact same language used by your aperture and your shutter speed. Understanding this latter is the key to balancing the exposure triangle in our next lesson. This brings us to the signal-to-noise ratio and the true cost of that gain. When you turn up the volume, you amplify the electronic hiss generated by the camera's circuitry. We call this read noise. But there is a bigger culprit causing that gain, and it isn't the camera's fault. It is the physical universe. Light consists of tiny particles called photons. When light is plentiful, it hits the sensor like a heavy, even downpour. But when light is scarce, it hits like a light, sputtering drizzle. This creates an uneven, spotty pattern on the sensor before the camera even does any math. We call this shot noise. Grain is often just the physical texture of a dark reality, and turning up your ISO simply makes that physical reality visible. Every camera has a base ISO, usually 100 or 200. This is the sensor's native resting state. When you increase ISO in the field, you are using the camera's built-in analog amplifier before the camera turns the light into a digital file. This almost always produces cleaner, richer results than shooting a dark photo at ISO 100 and applying digital gain on your computer later, which is essentially just zooming in on the static. Now, for absolute accuracy, you will hear arguments online about ISO invariance. Some modern, high-end mirrorless sensors are so efficient that the difference between analog and digital gain has vanished. On an ISO invariant camera, brightening a file by 3 stops in post-production yields the exact same amount of noise as raising your ISO by 3 stops in the field. But until you test and know exactly how your specific sensor behaves, the field standard remains: build the exposure right in the camera. At North of Wendigo, we follow a professional code. In the field, we do not fear grain, we manage it. Noise is not a flaw, it's the texture of reality when light is scarce. We accept a noise tax when the story requires a fast shutter speed in a low-light environment. If understanding the mechanics behind the noise is helping you feel more confident with your gear, make sure you're subscribed for more field dispatches. Image integrity matters above all else. We don't use AI to fake the light later. We capture the reality of the moment, even if that reality has a heavy texture to it. A blurry, unusable photo of a wolf is a failure. A sharp, grainy photo of a wolf is a documentary. Noise reduction software has improved dramatically, but it still can't restore detail that was never captured. If you push it too far, fur or human skin can start to look unnatural. But you also have the understanding that your image is fake. Your assignment is to find the exact point where technical limits create a mood. I call this the documentary threshold. Head out into a local alleyway at dusk or wait for the blue hour. Find a subject that feels naturally gritty. A weathered door, an old pickup truck, or a friend standing under a solitary street lamp. We are going to find your camera's ceiling, but we are going to use it to make art, not just stare at pixels. Mount your camera on a tripod. Set your aperture and shutter speed so the first shot is properly exposed, and take a photo at ISO 100. Then, increase your shutter speed to let in less light and compensate by doubling your ISO. Take the exact same photo at ISO 200, 400, 800, 3200, and 6400. Bring these files into your computer and look at them on a large monitor. As the ISO climbs, watch how the dynamic range shrinks. Watch the deep shadows lose detail and the highlights clip. But here's the creative test. Look for the exact ISO level where the grain makes the image feel like an old film still. Notice when the texture adds to the story of that weathered door, and then notice the exact step where it crosses the line and becomes a distracting, color-shifting mess. That line is your ceiling. Knowing exactly where that line is means you can intentionally use grain to add atmosphere without ever accidentally ruining a frame. Understanding the machine is the first step to forgetting it's there. Once you know how your gain works and understand the currency of stops, you stop fighting the camera, you stop fearing the dark, and you start drawing with the light you actually have. I'm Sylvie Lynn. Respect the signal, manage the noise, and I'll see you on the path.